We're good. Thank you. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for May 29th. We will start the proceedings. I call it to order. We'll start with council announcements. Councillor Chan, regional and local councillor Chan.
Good morning, May 29th, last, I guess, committee of the whole meeting in the month of May. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the about 1,800 people who came last Saturday. Some of the times actually rain, but came to the 2024 Spring Fair that was held in the town park. And I'm also grateful to the presence of Ontario Minister Michael Parser, Mayor West, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Tree, and Councillor Civilis, the York Regional Police 2 District Superintendent and Inspector, Deputy Fire Chief, as well as also the whole team of the 2 district core unit police officers, as well as the some of our firefighters and York Region paramedics with the ambulance there on the day still celebrating the Paramedic Services Week with the theme, Help You, Help Us. So it's a fun-filled day. The rain is nothing. People just enjoy the complimentary food and have a good time. And even families, particularly children, who stick around until 3:40 for that afternoon. So thank you all. And shout out to the events team and my assistant Helen and all the volunteers who make a wonderful event in the midst of not so great weather. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Welcome to the barbecue season. The annual Ward 3 barbecue will be held next Friday, exactly 10 days from now, on June 7th. So I would like to extend my invitation to all residents of Richmond Hill, especially to staff, and come out and enjoy a wonderful evening. It's nice to see people coming together, bringing the community together, so all are invited. So next Friday, June 7th, the annual Ward 3 barbecue. Hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Twee, do you have announcements?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So there are 2 announcements. The first one, last weekend in Ward 4 Hill Hospice, there was a walking fundraising event happening, support our hospice locally. And the final fundraising was $140,000, more than $140,000. So say thank you so much for all the residents and supporters, sponsors, and community members, and to support our local charity events. So thank you so much for this. And also, because summer's coming, my office being report. I'm assuming majority of council members' office report a lot of the grass-related complaints. So just kindly reminding, please cut your grass in time, make our community in the street more beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Tom. Oh, okay, my turn. All right. I just wanted to note we're wearing red today to recognize Accessibility and Inclusion Day. There are over 8 million Canadians that have one or more challenging physical disabilities, and youth are the greatest group increasing with disabilities. So I think accessibility and inclusion is something that we all recognize and hope that it's going to become top of mind for many of us. That's it for me for council announcements. And now introduction of emergency time sensitive matters. Seeing none. Adoption of the agenda. Councillor Thompson, all those in favor? That is carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interests and general nature thereof. Seeing none. Identification of items requiring separate discussion. Councillor Chan.
Madam Chair, I'd like to pull 11.5 regarding property standards bylaw and the new clean neighborhoods bylaw. Thank you.
That was all in 11.5?
On 5.
Okay.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Councillor Tweed.
I would like extract 11.1. And also there's another one, 11.5 as well.
Thank you. Councillor Shu.
Actually, it is the same as Deputy Mayor Chen as 11.5. Thank you.
Thank you. I would also like to pull, anybody else? I'd like to pull 11.2. And we are already going to talk about 11.6 because we have a delegation. Okay, that's it. Adoption of the remainder of agenda items. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Twee, all those in favor? That carries. Thank you. Public hearings, seeing none. Presentations. Our first presentation is by Bob Levesque, Director, Infrastructure Delivery regarding the 2024 Asset Management Plan. Hello, Bob. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Davidson and members of the Committee of the Whole. I'm very proud to bring forward the 2024 Asset Management Plan today for your approval. Next slide. So our presentation today will begin by describing how the Corporate Asset Management Program has advanced to where we are today. Next, we'll dive into why the 2024 Asset Management Plan was developed, what's in it, and how it will be used. And lastly, we will discuss how the plan will support the ongoing work of the Capital Sustainability Steering Committee and the development of the 2025 capital budget. And we'll finish off with next steps and then open it up for any questions. Next slide. So here's a snapshot of our asset management journey. Since 2019, the city's been ramping up our corporate asset management planning capabilities. It all began with the development and approval of the initial asset management policy, and then the design and implementation of an internally developed and maintained enterprise asset management system, which we refer to as the EAM. Last year, we presented the inaugural 2023 State of Infrastructure Report to Council, and this was the first time all city-owned assets and data was consolidated into one single report using a framework that provided that consistent and transparent analysis of all assets across the corporation. Looking at where we are today, the culmination of all the progress to date has resulted in the development of this 24 plan. It represents the third major corporate asset management report and is a testament to the teamwork and collaboration among all impacted departments and divisions. Briefly looking ahead, we will be producing a 2025 asset management plan next year with two major differences from the 24 plan. The 25 plan will include proposed levels of service as well as an updated assessment of all city-owned assets. Next slide. So there are three main purposes of the 24 asset management plan. First, the 24 plan will achieve legislative compliance with the next provincial regulatory reporting deadline. And this includes having a council-approved asset management plan in place by July 1st, 2024. This is important as upper levels of government now require municipalities to have an approved asset management plan that achieves this regulatory requirement in order to apply for and obtain grant funding. Secondly, the plan provides a suggested evidence-based asset management investment strategy that supports reliable city services. Identifying and knowing upcoming asset renewal needs ensures a plan can be developed and maintain them in a financially sustainable manner. And lastly, the suggested asset investment strategy will assist with the development of the 2025 capital budget by identifying asset investment levels based on needs. Also, through the risk framework, these needs can be prioritized to where they are needed the most. Next slide. So in order for the 24 plan to achieve these goals, a broad analysis of all city-owned assets is included. The city's assets have been categorized into the 11 services that they support, as seen on the right. This provides a line of sight and understanding of how investment in assets positively impacts services for the community. The city's capital budget and forecast is also organized and presented in the same manner for that reason. And looking at the left-hand figure, we've developed a plan that achieves regulatory compliance and an investment strategy based on what assets the city owns, their value, the condition, and ages. And the plan measures the condition-based levels of service and the current performance of all its assets. It forecasts the asset lifecycle renewal activities and future needs to ensure the city's assets are performing as intended. And finally, the plan includes an asset investment strategy that brings all of these considerations together to identify investment and funding levels that enable us to reliably maintain our assets and services. Next slide. So an asset management plan really starts with an understanding of all the assets the city owns and their condition, which informs the ongoing future life cycle investment treatments. The city's various divisions and sections proactively and continually assess the condition of assets through various technical condition assessments. Generally, condition assessments involve monitoring and inspecting the assets to determine the degree of deterioration, any deficiencies, and whether or not they're functioning as intended, and any potential impacts to service. Some examples include tennis court and playground assessments, closed circuit television inspections of sanitary and storm sewer system, which can identify structural defects such as cracked or disjointed pipes. Other examples include inspection of the road network with technology that collects pavement condition, legislated bridge inspections, building condition assessments for the city's facilities. Now, these assessments ensure there's a proactive plan for renewal of assets so they can continue to provide reliable community services. And all of these results have been incorporated into the EAM and into the 2024 Asset Management Plan. Next slide. When technical condition assessments are not feasible, we use age and remaining service life as a proxy for condition. As such, we track the average age and typical lifespan of our assets by service. Many of these assets were installed as part of the growth that Richmond Hill experienced in the 80s. And as such, our average age of our infrastructure is about 15 to 30 years. So from this perspective, we're in relatively good shape. But with the data collected, we can identify any maintenance that will be required over the years to ensure the longest lifespan and possible for each asset. Next slide. All the city's asset data and the results from these technical condition assessments are then incorporated into the city's EAM. The EAM now contains approximately 430,000 assets. The EAM then applies 3 strategies, which I will go into shortly, but they include the life cycle strategy and levels of service and risk frameworks, all of which allows asset investment forecasting. This means the EAM provides an evidence-based approach to understanding and forecasting future capital investment needs in a more advanced and sophisticated way. The EAM can then project the impacts on levels of service and condition from different investment and funding levels. And this really allows us to get the biggest bang for our buck and estimate how much investment is needed to maintain assets for reliable services. It can also estimate potential funding gaps based on comparing the suggested investment needs to available financing. Next slide. So I'm going to briefly go over some of the key results and recommendations of the 2024 Asset Management Plan, starting with the total asset valuation and average condition. On the left, you can see the total replacement value of all assets is now at $11.4 billion, which is broken down by the 11 service categories. And for the great news on the right, you can see that the average condition of all assets has remained as grade A or very good. Through the city's ongoing condition assessments, maintenance lifecycle activities, and robust operating and capital budget process, we've been able to manage our assets as required. However, although the majority of the assets are in very good or good condition and are relatively young, ongoing investments will still be required to maintain them as they age and deteriorate over time. In addition, as new asset inventories grow over time and yearly inflationary pressures continue, the future renewal needs will gradually increase. Understanding the city's state of infrastructure was really the first step in the development of the asset management plan and the investment strategy. Next slide. So the next 2 slides show the 2024 state of infrastructure results, and these are just a snapshot of the 11 asset categories. Well, I'm not going to go over all of the results. The full SOI report can be found in the appendix of the plan. We can pick an asset category like the roadway system as shown in the upper left and see that in this category, it consists not only of 1,215 lane kilometers of road, but also includes 14,000 streetlights, traffic signals, bridges and culverts, as well as fleet and condition. The average condition rating is good, and the replacement value here is $1.79 billion. Next slide. On this slide, we see the SOI results for the remaining categories, and we could pick another example here, such as recreation facilities as shown in the upper left. And similarly, we can see that in this category, there are 11 community centers, 5 arenas, a public education facility, supplemental facilities, 20 parking lots, and their illumination, recreation equipment, and fleet. The average condition rating is also good, and the replacement value here is 360 million. Next slide. So the development of the 24 plan is based on the 3 technical strategies for the city's assets and how they interact with each other. And this enables an evidence-based, data-driven approach. Looking at the left, the first technical strategy is the levels of service framework, focusing on monitoring and measuring performance. It also considers customer expectation. This supports decisions to provide reliable services to meet community expectations. And moving to the right circle, we see the life cycle management strategy, which are the planned treatments throughout the asset's life to maintain them. The importance of these life cycle strategies is that the EAM can forecast evidence-based future investment needs. Lastly, the risk management framework assesses the potential likelihood and consequence if an asset were to fail. The benefit of this framework is that it's being used to support the prioritization of capital investment needs and capital project budget requests. There are some examples of each of these over the next couple of slides. Next slide. The level of service framework includes strategic, customer, and technical levels of service, and we're informed from the city's strategic goals and vision through master plans, studies, strategic priorities, and day-to-day operational activities. In this example, we're looking at recreation facilities, and we can see the 4 main components that drive this technical level of service: reliability and quality, focus on condition of the facilities and equipment, while scope considers the programs offered and the number of participants. From an environmental perspective, we can see the energy and water usage for our community centers and arenas. Next slide, please. If we consider the life cycle management strategy, we know that assets evolve through a series of stages during its service life. It starts with the initial design, construction, then on to operation and maintenance, repairs, rehabilitation, and then eventually replacement or reconstruction. And this graph represents the life cycle of a typical road. Its performance is shown as the solid black line. As it ages, its condition declines until it reaches its end of life. However, from a public safety perspective, we would like to keep the performance of that road in the light green or yellow zone, which is good or fair condition. We can see the impact interventions have to keep that road in an acceptable condition and at the same time extend its service life. Interventions may include pothole repairs, crack sealing, and then as it ages further, we look at resurfacing, and then finally a full reconstruction of the road. The timing of these interventions are predicted as capital lifecycle strategies, technical condition assessments, expert engineering principles, and industry best practices are all incorporated into the EAM. The 2024 plan includes complete descriptions of the life cycle activities and capital treatments undertaken by the city for all its assets. And this really established the foundation for the forecasting of future asset renewals and recommended also in the 2024 plan. Next slide. The last technical strategy developed and implemented into the EAM was the risk framework. And this framework assesses and quantifies the potential likelihood of asset failures and asset criticality to estimate risk exposure. Based on this risk framework, the EAM and the 2024 plan shows that overall the city's assets are on average very low risk. It is noted here that assets identified with medium risk or high risk have been identified and captured in the 2024 capital budget and forecast. The real power of this is that it allows for the consistent evaluation and comparison of all city assets to support the prioritization of asset renewal needs to when and where they're needed most. For example, a large water main under a road with high traffic volumes, maybe adjacent to an environmentally sensitive area, would be prioritized over a smaller water main that's maybe not in a necessarily a sensitive area. Next slide. So we've utilized those strategies to develop a suggested state of good repair asset investment plan. This plan is focused solely on the existing state of good repair infrastructure needs. We chose to conduct the analysis from 2024 to 2051 so that all existing assets would be compared over the same planning forecast as the city's master plans and studies. The 2024 capital budget was used to approximate an appropriate starting level of asset investment. Based on the analysis, we've determined that there is a $284 million infrastructure backlog. This represents an overdue and current life cycle, current asset investment needs. Most municipalities have a backlog, and you may have actually seen City of Toronto's reported on in the news recently. It should be noted that Richmond Hill's backlog represents just 2.5% of our total valuation. This strategy recommends the phased-in annual investment approach that maintains current condition-based levels of service by 2051. Starting with the 2024 capital budget's initial state of good repair investment of $57 million, we've shown an increase of $4.6 to $6.1 million annually to address this backlog. This approach would maintain current base levels of service while considering financial sustainability. Many municipalities have deferred rehabilitation of infrastructure in favor of short-term budget relief. The upkeep of infrastructure is essential as it directly impacts our residents' quality of life. Next slide. So one of the great things about the EAM system is that it can forecast impacts on the asset's level of service under different investment levels. And we have a couple examples here to look at. As you can see on the left-hand side, the current pavement quality of the city's roads are a 76 out of 100, which means they are on average in good condition. The purple line here represents the pavement quality index. If we use the 2024 state of good repair expenditure with a 2% annual increase, we can see that the PQI continues to drop as the road system ages. However, we can calculate the estimated expenditure required to maintain that road condition to our set level of service, which is represented by the blue line. This approach was used to determine our suggested investment strategy. Similarly, looking at the right-hand side, this depicts trails within parks and natural areas. The same logic applies here to trails as it does to roads. Trail condition will deteriorate over time, and as the treatments are identified, the trails will be renewed and their condition improved over time. Next slide. So as the 24 plan is based on state of good repair for existing assets, you may be wondering about future growth-related assets. As new assets are built to achieve Richmond Hill's vision, there will be ongoing increased asset renewals to operate and maintain them. For this 24 plan, we've included the growth-related capital forecast that was approved in the 24 capital budget, and these were based on the various master plans and studies. And looking at the graph on the left, the 10-year growth-related capital expenditures, if implemented as outlined in the 24 capital budget, would total approximately $845 million, which would represent a 7% increase in the city's asset inventories over the next 10 years. The two spikes you see there are for parks and recreation services, which includes several park expansion projects and the new North Leslie facility. We've had some discussions at the Capital Sustainability Steering Committee as to the proposed timing of those projects. The 24 plan also includes a preliminary estimated operating forecast. Operating expenditures can be estimated based on the value of new growth-related assets added in, and this represents a preliminary estimate that will be refined over time. Next slide. So this is a figure you've likely seen before. It represents the path to the 25 capital and operating budget. The suggested phase-in asset investment strategy for the city's existing state of good repair assets in this 24 plan will be presented to the Capital Sustainability Steering Committee for consideration in the development of the fiscal sustainability strategy as seen in purple and the upcoming 25 capital budget and forecast. The 24 asset management plan will be used to inform what the appropriate asset investment needs are. Key considerations will include balancing the infrastructure backlog, evolving asset conditions over time, identifying the appropriate service levels, managing cost pressures, favoring available sources of financing, minimizing risk, and furthering the desired vision for Richmond Hill. Next slide. So there are 4 recommendations in the staff report for your consideration today, and we've listed them here for your reference. Next slide. So in terms of next steps, we will have the CSSC on June 4th and then council on June 5th. Once the plan is approved, it will be submitted to the province as well as posted on our website for public access. Moving past June, we will start to workshop with the required city staff, utilizing existing master plans and studies to explore proposed levels of service. We will also begin to update all the asset data in the EAM, and both tasks will be required as part of the development of the 2025 Asset Management Plan, which will be required to be approved by Council in June of 2025 to meet the next phase of legislation. Next slide. So I'd like to thank you for your time. I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce Steve Tennis, our Manager of Corporate Asset Management, here today, and he's our local expert on asset management. So I'm bringing him up just in case there's any in-depth questions on asset management. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And so this discussion will be about the presentation. There will be an opportunity to discuss the guts of it afterwards. So does anybody like to speak at this? Councillor Tree, will you move the motion to receive the report?
Sure, I will move the
Thank you.
motion. I do only have one question. Remember in the last slide 1 or 2, there is a yellow section. That's a deficiency or lack of maintenance. Do you mind, maybe Mr. Clerk, can you please bring that slide in there? There's a big circle with a yellow section. I know that maybe we need to pay attention, just wondering what exactly the details in there.
Okay.
Yeah, oh yeah, stormwater part. Okay, got it.
So if you could just rephrase the question, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I just wondering because I saw that sections as yellow, so it looks like we need some kind of special attention or measurements or actions planned there.
Yeah, so on the right side, we've color coded the condition of all the assets based on the groupings. So anything in yellow, the value of those assets are grouped into that category. We've identified them, and they are in the capital budget as proposed projects.
So those stormwater, I remember yesterday we just passing one of the stormwater reports. So I'm hoping from 2024 April, we're going to charge more, we're going to make it balanced, and this section will be addressed accordingly, right?
Yeah, so this plan here represents basically the existing condition and our needs for state of good repair. Finance will develop the actual financing plan to deal with those. So we will make the recommendations and work closely with our finance partners to come up with the plan.
Okay, and another question regarding to there are 0.3 billion, around 3% as a poor and very poor. What exactly that section is?
Yeah, so those are assets that we've identified as, going through their life cycle and have reached a certain point. Maybe Steve could give us a couple of examples just for reference. So just poor and very poor.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. Through the chair to the councillor, the assets in poor and very poor represent assets through the condition assessments that have reached the end of their life or are deteriorating or are no longer functioning as required. And you can see from this chart here, there's approximately about $450 million worth of assets in poor and very poor. And I would suggest this is not necessarily a bad thing. I would suggest to maximize the value of the assets, we need to use those assets. And when they've come to their end of life, which is what is showing in poor and very poor, the most important part is to have a proactive plan to address those assets. And as Director Levesque said, the vast majority of the assets in poor and very poor are somewhere in the 10-year capital budget. So staff are keenly aware of what's in poor and very poor, and we have a plan to address those assets going forward through the budget.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't have further questions.
Thank you. And next we have local regional councillor DePola.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the answer that you gave may tell me that I'm not asking this at the right time. So it seems like you're compiling the state of our assets, and the strategy is going to come later. I wanted to ask about how you build in flexibility. Like if a water main breaks, that's jumps to the top of priority, obviously, and has to be dealt with. And I'm thinking, just to give an example, in the 19th Avenue Railroad crossing, something's happened there where you can't safely cross unless you're going 10 or 15 kilometers an hour. And that has to it's got to jump ahead of everything and be dealt with for safety. Just as an example, we'll address it another time. So as we develop a strategy to deal with this, how do we build in that flexibility?
Yes, excellent question. Through the chair to the councillor. This is the beauty of our asset management plan. The risk strategy looks at some of that criticality. So if you have an asset that's failing, like a water main, there's a lot of breaks, its priority shoots up and almost becomes a mandatory project in the capital budget. In some cases, if that project is urgently needed, we will approach council during the year to secure additional funding if it's not in the budget already. So sometimes these things happen, especially over the winter. You get a lot of freeze thaw and perhaps a lot of water main breaks on a site that we didn't predict. Maybe it was 5 years in the future that we're looking at that. It now brings it right up to the forefront and gets done right away. And I think the Cedar Avenue water main is a good example of that. That happened a couple of years ago. We've identified it, put it in the budget, and addressing it right away.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you. I actually have some questions, but I'll wait till later. I see no other. And we have a motion on the floor to receive this presentation. All those in favor? That motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have a presentation by Gigi Lee, Director, Financial Services and Treasurer.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm here today to present for Council's approval of the city's 2025 to 2032 Water and Wastewater Financial Plan, which was developed in partnership with Watson & Associates. All municipalities providing water services are required to be licensed, and the city is currently undertaking the licensing renewal process. Part of that licensing requirement is for the city to submit a financial plan to the province. The city retained Watson Associates to undertake the financial plan and rate calculations for water and wastewater. As you saw in the earlier asset management plan presentation, which identified asset management investment levels based on needs, the financial plan and rate study are about the capital lifecycle costs, as well as the operating costs that are associated with it. So they have been identifying the funding requirements are within the financial plan. This report does not represent a budgetary commitment on the part of the city. It is to satisfy the requirement for licensing. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Gary Scanlon, Independent Policy Advisor retired from Watson & Associates, to present the 2025 to 2032 Water and Wastewater Financial.
Thank you. Mr. Scanlon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be with you and council or committee this morning. I apologize. I'm out in British Columbia right now, so I'm coming to you by video feed. Yes, thanks, Gigi. I'd like to introduce as well, who's in the audience, is my two colleagues, Daryl Abbs and Navreet Baines, and the three of us have worked with staff in order to provide the development of the longer-term rate forecast, as well as the preparation of the financial plan, which Gigi noted has to be submitted to the province. So I'll touch on those as I go through. Can I have the next slide, please? So very quickly, we'll overview the study purpose. We'll talk about the approach to the calculations that we've undertaken. We'll look at the rates that we'll be looking at. And once again, this is a preliminary forecast extending out to 2032. And then talk about next steps, which is part of the filing of some of this information with the province. Next slide, please. As noted, we were retained to undertake both the rate forecast as well as the formal document, which is the province calls a water financial plan, which must be submitted as part of you receiving your license to operate your water system. Next slide, please. All municipalities who are providing water, whether they are creating the water, such as the region does in providing the supply, or you have the full distribution system, both levels must prepare these documents and submit to the province. This is under a regulation which is 45307, and it is to some extent an interim a piece of legislation pending the province finalizing, full full asset management integration into your rates, and that'll come out. There's pending legislation which will come out over the next couple of years, which will further refine how we do these studies and the submissions to the province. But right now, this is 45307, basically is taking the rate study that I'll present to you, and for water, translating that into really a format that looks like financial statements. So it's not really your budget, operating and capital budgets. It's transforming it into a different format. So that's really what this legislation requires us to do. Next slide. Now, it does recognize, and in the legislation, it talks about it being a living document. So what we'll present today is a point in time, allows for refinements as you're doing the year-to-year review of your capital and operating budgets. And when we're doing the rates, obviously we need to consider your normal budgetary process, what your capital needs are, and Mr. Levesque did a very good job overviewing primarily what the needs are for the water and wastewater system. Then we'll have the operating fund, which is significantly influenced by the region because you purchase water and the wastewater treatment service from the region of York. And then as well, we have reserve fund transfers. So going from the operating budget, setting money aside and using that money over time in order to address your capital program and try and smooth out your rates on a year-to-year basis. And I'll show you that in a moment. Next slide, please. Very simply, our forecast has looked from today, and we have considered that you're going to have new customers over the next 8 to 10 years. So we've incorporated the increase in the use of the water and the wastewater system into our calculations. At the bottom, you can see is the capital program, and that's the bottom green box. And primarily, most of the infrastructure, which I'll show you in a minute, is over 90% of it relates to asset management, where there is an influence of the development charges program. There is some money that has to be contributed from the operating or from your rates in order to finance the non-DCable portion of these projects, and we've incorporated that. And then you can see we're looking at funding a lot of that through reserve fund transfers, and the reserves are basically funded from year to year by monies moving from your operating budget down into your reserve funds. The net amount that needs to be recovered, we're dividing it by the volume. So that's where we come up with our volume rate. So the amount that we charge your water customers based on their water consumption. And so we have a rate for water, and then based on that bill, that meter, we also charge a wastewater charge. Next slide, please. As noted, we have significant needs that are being identified between 2024 and 2032. And as I've noted, a lot of this is with respect to asset management and having to address that financial funding over the next 8 or 9 years. As noted, it's a continuous process. There will be updates from year to year, but right now this is the best forecast that's been developed through our discussions with all city staff. Next slide, please. The operating budget contains a number of different elements. The purchases from the York region is a significant portion of your water rates. If you take a look at the total amount of expenditures, the money that you send to the region is about 65% of the water budget, operating budget goes to the region, and about 70% of the wastewater. So they have a significant impact on the rates that we charge the homeowners. Obviously, we do have day-to-day administration and the operations individuals that are out maintaining the system. So they're the wages, the benefits, as well as contracted needs are included in that operating budget. There are some chargebacks between stormwater and these funds. They've been included as well. And then the biggest component, a larger component that we need to consider over time is the transfers to the reserves and the reserve funds. So this is really the drivers behind what we're seeing on the day-to-day operations. Next slide, please. The capital, we're looking in total of about $171 million between 2024 and 2032. So the water is represented in the blue, and then the wastewater capital needs are represented in the green, and it's about $67 million. So in total, we have $238 million that we're developing a plan in order to fund over this period. Most of this, as I've noted, is state of good repair. It's arising from maintaining the existing assets. Only a small percent of the water, only about 12 million of that 171 is related to new growth. So maybe expanding and replacing an existing water main. So only a small amount relates to the DCs, and then about 9% for wastewater. Next slide, please. This is the transfers from the operating budget that's going into the reserve funds. The plan that we've developed continues with council's preference of not using debt. So obviously the raising of the funds must come from the operating budget on a year-to-year basis. You can see that for 2025, the amount that we're raising, so I'm talking to the top chart, in total, we're at about $21 million. And over the forecast, we need to move up in the range of about $37 to $39 million in order to fully deal with the capital plan. At the top, you can see that the most significant increases relate to the water main. It's the one that has the largest needs. And then the wastewater, we can hold at for the next couple of years. And deal with it towards the end. You can see that the reserve fund balances, this is the bottom chart, moves from about 49 million. It dips down to about 29 million in the middle and then rises back up at the latter part. And if we go to the next slide, please, this just represents that we are using significantly the reserve funds over the 10 years. And you can see we ensured that we didn't allow the water main and the sanitary sewer replacement reserves to drop between $5 million each. Next slide. So the final outcome is to provide the rate forecast over the next 8 years. And once again, this will be something that'll be reviewed on a year-to-year basis. So this is a forecast. It's not something we're asking council to approve at this particular moment. Next slide. And just to represent, when you're looking at the actual rates or the rate increases, these are somewhat of the drivers behind that. The solid blue colors, the solid blue on the bottom, that's your water operating budget. So that is the portion which is sending money to the region for the purchase of water, the day-to-day administration, and the operations. If you go to the lighter blue, which is the 7%, that's the amount of the water budget which is being dedicated to transferring to the capital program. So you can see over time, we need to significantly increase that amount. The green represents your operating budget, the day-to-day operating expenditures, and correspondingly, the light green above is the capital program, and it generally is staying at about the same amount over time. So it's really the water, which is the driver over the next 10 years, the water needs. Next slide. And when we put it all together and take a look at the rates, you can see currently right now that a water bill for 2024 is $368 on average, and the wastewater bill is $519. So we have a larger component for water than we do wastewater. As we move out over time, the increases need to be higher on the water side than the wastewater, And by the time we hit 2032, you can see that we're targeting to have almost the same water bill as the wastewater bill. And the major driver, once again, in that is getting the transfers to the reserves to address the capital program. The very bottom chart just identifies that we're on an annual basis. On average, we're less than $60 a year, or roughly $5 a month increase for both your water and your wastewater bill. So when you look at your full bill, we would consider about a $5 increase every year in order to accommodate the full systems. Next slide, please. Right now, on a comparison basis, you can see the lighter orange is your combined water and wastewater bill. We're at about $886 for that average bill, and you're at the lower end in comparison to your other York Region municipalities. Looking at the increase, you can see there's a marginal increase in comparatively amongst the other municipalities, but we haven't given you 2025's budget for, or their rates for next year. We would expect, in my experience in with a lot of municipalities, is their bill, the water bills are probably increasing in the range of 5 to 10% per year currently. So once again, you should stay in and about the same position that you are today. Next slide. So we've worked with staff to review the rates. We've made some minor adjustments to the capital plan in order to smooth out really in the early part of the forecast. The reserves and reserve funds, we've ensured that they're at a level that can stay healthy over the forecast period. And we've ensured that we've provided for all of the operating expenditures that we need. The next slide just concludes with our recommendations that are contained within the staff report. And I'll leave that for your review. And I think that concludes my presentation, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Do we have, Councillor, Regional Local Councillor Polar, will you receive this?
Just repeat the presentation, yes. And then
Thank you.
we'll
And
debate
is
it
that,
later.
do you have a question? Mayor West, do you have a question?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Gary. I appreciate that. It's nice to see you as always, even if it's only in 2 dimensions. I wonder if you could put up the slide, one of the last slides we saw with the rate that we're kind of heading towards. I just want to clarify something in that graph. Okay, so I think I heard you say this, but I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So at the present moment, the average bill is $886 in Richmond Hill, and we're looking at an average bill of $940. But this doesn't include any of the increases that other municipalities are going to be also proposing for their 2025 rates. So, I mean, where we stand within that matrix there is not actually where we would necessarily stand once the other increases in other municipalities have been announced. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. I would suspect, as I say, we're experiencing 5 to 10% increases in the rates, like municipalities across Ontario generally are experiencing those level of increases. If we do see the rest of the York Region municipalities with that level of increase, you'll be in the exact same position you are right now. So that lighter orange represents your relative position with the other municipalities. And we would suspect that you will be in the exact same position come next year.
Okay. I just want to highlight that because, I mean, I think the reality is that, and, you know, we had a talk about infrastructure before this, and in a lot of ways, there's probably a lot of commonalities on this point that, you know, all of the things that we built a number of years ago, or even today for that matter, are aging and you know, and are going to be needing to be fixed up and repaired and maintained and so on over time. And, you know, we are certainly not the only municipality that's facing the kinds of pressures that are being described in this presentation and also in the presentation before that. So, you know, I think traditionally, you know, people kind of take water and wastewater for granted. You know, you turn the tap on, it it comes out clean and healthy, and you flush it away and it goes away. But the thing is, the infrastructure that we need to provide that level is expensive, and it's aging, and it's not going to get any cheaper over time. So I appreciate this presentation. I actually appreciate the fact that the government is dictating that we do this kind of analysis, and I presume this is all coming out of the learning that we painfully did after Walkerton. So, this is an important exercise that we all go through to make sure that we're working in a sustainable way. And in large part, where the rubber meets the road in this case is to keep our community safe. So anyway, I just want to make sure that that was clear. And I appreciate the presentation and all the detail that went into that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Councillor Twee.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. So I just want through this inquiry here. I heard federal government, also Ontario government, there issue a fund for infrastructure fundings regarding to the trails, street, whatever. I'm not sure. So is there any possibilities that our city can apply for the funding using for not only for the waterman and others, but also maybe for the asset management regarding the trails and street? I'm not sure is this a correct answer or not.
Excuse me, Mr. Clerk, is this more for the discussion later rather than the report, since the report did not deal with this?
Thank you. Through the chair, yeah, I would recommend and advise council that if you have questions on the presentation, if you have specific questions about the plan set out in the report, to wait till we debate that.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Local Councillor Chen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Like Mayor West, I was struck at the slide number 14 because based on the explanation that was given, I think that need to be emphasized, because when a member of the public look at that, you're going up that much. But as the answer is, after you factor in the other municipalities' proposed increase, the place where this dark orange or beige, whatever, the arrow 940 is not showing us where we are in the high end, but still in the kind of lower end, which is the original position. So personally, I understand this is to show us, but it potentially can be misinterpreted. So I don't know. Well, it is what it is. You already presented, but perhaps in communication with going out further on, you might need to explain that. But going back to the slides, number 13, and in the body of the staff report, already mentioned it, and it's also talking about in the top, there's 3 different blocks on the top block, and it shows very clearly the sharp increase between 2025 to 2029. I might have missed it. Is there any particular reasoning for that? I do hear that capital projects would have to be quite a bit between that period. So through you, Madam Chair, maybe just for the ordinary Jane and Joe on the street, and including myself, what would be the main factors that lead to that sharp increase in that time period? Through you, Madam Chair.
I'm happy to answer that, Madam Chair, if you like.
Go ahead.
There was a graph that I showed a few slides earlier, which is, it's not the operating side of the budget which is showing the sharper increase for water. It's the capital program. So because we're not issuing debt, we're trying to fund that capital program. You can see the light blue. So the dark blue and the light blue is your water related expenditures. The dark blue is the operating budget. So that's buying the water from the region, maintaining the pipes on a day-to-day basis, administration, etc. The light blue is what you're transferring into the reserves in order to finance the capital program. And if you recall, the capital program for water was 171 million over the next 10 years. And a lot of that is front-ended. So we need to increase faster the transfers for water into the reserves. The wastewater we can hold at a reasonable level because both the reserves are in a solid place, and the capital program is only $67 million over the 10 years.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that because that helps, well, for us as a representative of the committee to explain in some general reasoning why that is the case. But thank you very much for the showing. I would say this is data supportive modeling and explanation. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? I do have one quick question, and I know you sort of explained this, but you'll have to talk slower for me. On slide 13, how is it wastewater costs, it has a bigger bill, slide 13, if we have a moment to see that. The wastewater bill is higher than the water rate forecast, when I would think there's, if you turn on the tap, I'm sure this is a very simplistic view of looking at water, but if I turn on the tap, I assume there's less wastewater after I use it than there was when I started. You mentioned a reserve fund. Please explain again why wastewater is higher than water.
For right now, for the region, I think that the region represents of your total water bill. It represents about 65% of your water bill and about 70% of your wastewater. And so the largest portion comes from the region. So that's why there's a significant difference. The second part of it is how much money we're transferring in order to fund the capital assets. And over the rate now currently, the amount you're transferring into the reserve is less than what you need for water. So we are needing to increase those transfers in order to get more money available to address the asset management plan for water. That's
my question. Thank you so much. I see no other questions. We have a motion on the floor to receive this presentation. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next, we have a delegation from Julie Ban, Richmond Hill Canoe Club. Ms. Ban, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Julie, and I'm here representing the Richmond Hill Canoe Club. I've been a member of the club for 10 years, a member of the board of directors for 4 years, and currently I hold the position of Commodore. I'm here to provide comment on agenda item 11.6, a staff report regarding the future use of the Lake Wilcox Boathouse. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to this. Next slide, please. As indicated in the report, the Richmond Hill Canoe Club was granted use of the boathouse in the early 90s. First and foremost, the club would like to thank the city for this. We take great pride in our contributions and the contributions that we have made to the community, whether through our programming or through our mere presence on the lake. This wouldn't have been possible without the use of the boathouse. I'd also like to acknowledge item D under recommendations of the report, which speaks to our continued use of the boathouse until such time as a decision is made. The club is grateful for this, and we will continue to take good care of this facility. Know that RHCC has pride in the boathouse and that our membership works really hard to upkeep and maintain both the building and the surrounding area. For those of you who may not be familiar with us, the Richmond Hill Canoe Club is a not-for-profit sport organization which operates under our provincial and national governing bodies. We have a very committed board of directors. We employ one full-time head coach, and we have a supporting coaching staff of approximately 15 to 20 youths. All of our coaches are certified through CKC. All possess first aid certification. Many also possess their National Life Saving Society or lifeguarding certifications. As a not-for-profit, we are unique in our ability to keep our prices as accessible as possible, offering a rare opportunity for many to be deeply involved in an Olympic recognized sport, whether as a recreational or as a high-performance paddler. Next slide, please. The club has seen great success over its 30-year history, most notably is Roland Varga's participation at the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. More local success includes 6 of our athletes who were recognized at the City of Richmond Hill's Breakfast of Champions just a few weeks ago. In addition, we had one of our women kayakers earn a spot on the podium with a bronze medal at the Canadian Championships in Halifax last year. Next slide, please. In addition to our high performance program, we take great pride in our community programming, where we introduce the sport of canoe kayak in a fun and safe environment. Our most popular programs include our Canoe Kids Day Camp, Adult Intro, Stand-Up Paddleboard, and Dragon Boat. Next slide, please. I would be amiss to not mention our HCC's very healthy Masters program. Our Masters, who currently range in age from 25 to 82 years young, compete at provincial, national, and international regattas. I think it's important to highlight that this is a sport for life and that our HCC welcomes the whole family. Next slide, please. The final program I'd like to tell you about is our drop-in program, every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m., where we provide members of the community the opportunity to try out a canoe or a kayak for an hour under the supervision of our coaching staff. Our presence on the lake on Saturday and Sunday afternoons is where we find ourselves truly filling the role of ambassadors for the lake and where we provide much needed water safety education to the general public. In addition to our trained staff, we have a fully stocked first aid kit, a recently purchased AED, now located inside the boathouse. While we focus on those who have signed up for our drop-in program, we often find ourselves interacting with the community at large and at times performing rescues for the general public. With this in mind, I'd like to circle back to the staff report on today's agenda and provide feedback on the potential options for the future of the boathouse. From our perspective, option 1, to continue to lease the boathouse to RHCC is the best choice for the City of Richmond Hill. Our motives are clear. We are committed to sport and recreation, and we are committed to community programming. And above all else, we are committed to water safety. I would like to express my clear opposition to option 3, which suggests removing the boathouse from the site entirely to allow greater water access to the public. This small lake is a popular destination, and it's already seeing a great deal of public use. An increase in public use without the presence of our HCC would lead to an increase in water safety issues, in addition to detrimental effects on the environment. Next slide, please. I would like to leave you with one final message. Much like the City of Richmond Hill, our HCC is here for the community at large to provide sport and recreation in a safe and fun environment. We would welcome the opportunity to discuss a public-private partnership with the city or any other opportunities for us to work together. And lastly, please accept my personal invitation to come down to the boathouse and pay us a visit. We'd be happy to show you around and to get you out on the lake. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will move on to agenda item 11.1. The request for approval of 12030 Yonge Street. Councillor Tweed.
Okay, move it and then have a discussion later.
Right?
11.1, right?
Well, yes, 11.1.
Okay, move the motion first.
Did
Yes.
you pull it? Yeah.
Should I move for it? Okay, sure.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Would you like to move this item? My
Yeah, let's
apologies.
move it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for our staff here support as well. I do have a few questions. Even there is no delegation or residents coming here, I just want to echo a few things. The first one regarding to the densities. Back to 2021, there are a few high topics discussed through the park meeting. One of them is the high density. And based on the chart here, I reviewed the FSI. So compared with 3 years ago, the FSI coming down a little bit from 3.62 to 3.56. So regarding to the high densities over there, what is currently the bylaw or the zoning or the FSI requirement as the land around that location?
Through the chair to Councillor Tree. The bylaw, it doesn't prescribe a particular density as it relates to the application in front of us today. Rather, the official plan prescribes an FSI of 2.0 FSI for this particular area of Yonge Street.
So based on 2.5, right? So what's the highest or heights of the requirements? Normally we have definition from the official plan.
Through the chair to Councillor Tree, the height in this particular stretch of Yonge Street is between 2 and 6 stories.
Okay, so for the approved building around that locations, is there any other plans or proposal being approved as 6 floors near that location?
Through the chair to Councillor Tree, there is a 6-story building approved just to the north at 12050 Yonge Street.
Thank you so much. I just want to address here, I know this unit is 156, no change from 3 years ago. Another question is, I know beside this new plan, we have 2 spots. One is under construction, going to build up the townhouses. Do you know number of that unit for the south or north of the Harris? Is something on top of your head?
Through the chair to Councillor Tree, I don't have the details of the adjacent plan, but we can get that for you.
Okay, thank you so much. I also know on the south side, Harris Street, there going to be a new townhouse section as well. If I remember correct, either 80 or 100. Let's make assumptions. North side is 80 new units. South side is going to be another 80 to 100, plus this 156 just in the small piece of land. So from area perspective, I'm assuming that's going to be a little bit high FSI compared with our official plan?
Through the chair, yes, it's slightly higher than what our official plan was anticipating. We did take a look at the cumulative review of the area. It does contemplate some a built form that was proposed similar to what's been proposed here today, but the densities are slightly higher. We've taken a look at a technical perspective to ensure that the capacity is there to accommodate the development and it meets all of our technical requirements. Therefore, we're supporting the increased density on this project.
Okay, thank you so much. My next question regarding to the schools pressures. From this piece of land, we are assuming around maybe 300 units coming. Is there any pressures to the local schools that can support this large or the population incoming?
Through the chair to Councillor Tree, as part of our standard process for reviewing development applications, we circulate the school boards to solicit comments and feedback so that they can advise if they have any concerns, and no concerns were raised with respect to all the applicable school boards.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question regarding to the park side. As I remember, inside of that community, we do have a small one, is like basketball court, and other entertainment here as well. So for the new plans, is there anything addressing or concerns regarding to the parkland or park site for later time?
Through the chair to Councillor Tree, the park facilities in the area are considered adequate to again accommodate this development, and cash in lieu of parkland is being requested. So no additional parkland is being required to accommodate this proposed development.
So all those new around 200 to 300 units will be using the existing park site?
Through the chair, that's correct. Okay.
My next question regarding traffic, as we mentioned, and going to be around 300 new units built up along this like a 60, 70 meters small street. For traffic load perspective, because it's close to Yonge Street, I was wondering, this is a single line currently existing, adding both sides around 300 units. It's going to be cause any problem for traffic?
Through the review of the application, a traffic impact study was done and has been accepted and signed off by our infrastructure planning and development engineering staff. I believe that the Harris Avenue is being urbanized, And that has all been taken into consideration as part of the review of the development proposal in front of us today.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question regarding to the signals for turn left to the Young Street. As I can tell, it's a really small street, and in front of that's the Jefferson Forest Street, which is the main core for local community. If the people or residents living on that street turn left, is there any distance requirement for that new building? When they turn left, it might have some visions or visibility concerns. What's the space between the Young Street to this new new building? Is there any enough space for pedestrians or drivers to see clearly along Young Street? The reason I'm asking here is because in front of that street is really a big downhill. So I know majority time people driving very fast at that intersection. So I was just wondering any concerns for the space visibility there.
Through the chair, through the review of the applications, traffic impact studies also take a look at sightline assessments and more closely as part of the subsequent site plan review process, and adjustments will be made accordingly. At this point, all the traffic impact studies and assessments have been reviewed and accepted by staff, and further review and evaluation of more discrete details will be done as part of the remaining site plan review process.
Okay, so I don't know the detail of the space from the 8th floor, because the 8th floor, if you turn left, 8th floor might be an obstacle for the visibility. I just want reminding here in case we will have the detailed designs, please consider that. That might be a challenge. I don't want to see any future instance at that corner. And my last question is regarding to the commercials, because many people are living behind these areas. Any other commercial buildings at this location? For example,
With respect, your time's up.
okay, I'll
Okay.
go to the next round. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you so much. Through you, the chair, I do have a question in regards to recommendation B and what the impact of that recommendation might be. We've noticed recently that it's not uncommon that in order to streamline the process that we may assign or delegate the commissioner to, act on our behalf in certain ways. And in this particular one, I want to make sure that I fully understand what position we might be putting the commissioner into. So if I understand that the commissioner is to decide whether or not to release the servicing allocations assignment for this proposal once staff have received and reviewed a yet to be submitted sustainability performance metrics tool from the applicant in support of this development. So my question is, if after the review, the commissioner feels that they cannot support the service allocation, and the applicant feels that it does support, I guess my question is, what are the potential outcomes if we find ourselves in a situation like that?
Through the chair to Councillor Thompson, if we feel that if there is a dispute, if you will, we as always continue to work with the applicant to kind of resolve that dispute, failing which we would bring a report back to council to get council direction on the servicing allocation assignment.
Thank you. So through you, the chair, then in a dispute situation like that, then this would come back to council versus putting the commissioner in that awkward spot. Okay, that was my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And does anyone else have any other questions in first round? Seeing none, Councillor Twee.
Thank you so much. I'll continue my next round of question regarding to the entertainment and also shopping stores, commercials over there. Even we have some shopping stores either on the Tower Hill, example, stores or banks, etc., or north side. For specific land here, is there any plans or any existing proposals for commercials, for example, fitness club or shopping center or convenience store, etc.?
Through the chair to Councillor Tree. So as part of the existing proposal that we have in front of us, there is a small commercial component. It is a mixed-use development. The city puts into place designations to facilitate commercial developments come forward, and they can capitalize on that designation to the extent that they see fit. So in this case, there is a commercial component, and we have planned for mixed commercial and residential uses on the Yonge Street corridor. And should proposals come forward that want to capitalize on those commercial, we encourage that. We encourage them. And we're seeing more and more of that mixed use format with commercial at grade to continue to support higher density residential developments that are coming along Yonge Street.
Okay, thank you so much. I do have a last question regarding to the parking lot. Look at 3 years ago, and the parking lot is around 187. The unit is 156. It's really a big lot of parking spot. But for the new proposal, the unit number are same, still 156. But the parking lot for residents reduced to 133. There are 50 of them or 54 of them less. So my question here is, what is the official requirement for resident parking? Is there any specific definition that reads for the parking? The second one, I'll ask why there are big drop.
So through the review of the application, the applicant has requested a reduced parking rate. And as part of the reduced parking rate, they were required to provide justification as well as transportation demand management measures to justify that reduced rate. Staff development and engineering staff have reviewed that parking justification and are satisfied that there will be adequate parking to support this development. Again, it is not within an MTSA, but it is on the Yonge Street corridor. And those types of factors do come into consideration in reviewing the parking as proposed for these types of residential developments on Yonge Street.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't have further questions.
Thank you. I see no other questions. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Now I pulled 11.2. If someone could move it, I would like to ask the questions. Mayor West, you move this. Do you have any remarks? I'll go first. Okay. My questions are this development to the acting commissioner, Gianetta. One of the drawings looks like it's 4 stories. It seems really high to me. Is it in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood as it's developing? And is it fit within our guidelines for height?
Through you to Councillor Davidson. So the proposed height of the dwelling, the semi-detached dwellings are 12 meters. That is comparable to the building heights in the particular area. Where we've seen approvals that we've provided for about 13.2 meters, in particular to the south and east of this development. With respect to the perceived height, there is a rooftop construction, if you will, that facilitates access to the rooftop amenity area. So it looks like a dormer, if you will. Those are not calculated in the total height, but based on our measurement of that projection, we're at about 13.5 meters, which is very comparable to the heights in the particular area in question.
Thank you. And further to that, dormers, is there any, does the city have any authority from a planning perspective to at least request more environmentally friendly building? Because a tall building is hot in the summer and hard to keep cool. The higher ceilings, my understanding is something, is there any options for the city to suggest more environmentally friendly build designs? Or is that something we'd have to do at a later date?
So through the building codes have been amended over time to include more sustainable building practices. And one of the objectives of the sustainability metrics is to encourage developers to utilize a menu of options. And those include some of the interior components of buildings. So I would say to you through the combination of our sustainability metrics, which does address some interior types of building opportunities, as well as the building code, which has continued to be amended to kind of reflect more sustainable design practices, you're going to achieve them there. Beyond that, I would say to you that we wouldn't be able to kind of govern those things.
Thank you. And my last question through to Acting Commissioner Giannetta is that neighborhood, the established neighborhood on Puccini Poplar, they've been through a lot in the last few years. There is so much development, and the same with the south side of King. There's so much dirt, so much dust, and it's death by 1,000 cuts because it's not like all the developments happened in the last few years in its entirety. It's piecemeal. What can the city do to keep the dust down, the dirt off the road, the blockage, the inconvenience to the existing neighbors? Because I hear from a lot of them and they're not happy. And now we're going down another few years of another development. What does the city do to keep that area clean and make sure that development is in line with what our rules are for blocking roads and whatnot?
So as part of our many of the developments that went through site plan approval, we require the applicants to provide construction management plans and, commit to ensuring that the roads are kept clean, that noise and pollution is kept down, and the nuisances of construction are minimized in accordance with the city's bylaws and standard construction requirements. So we continue to do that as part of all of our approvals. Especially related to infill, which can be more of a nuisance because there are established residents in the areas. If there are kind of property standard requirements, I said, they are encouraged to call, bylaw and to ensure bylaw enforcement to ensure that the developers are doing what they need to do. We also, like I said, we provide clauses in our site plan agreements to ensure that they are aware of their obligations and to ensure that they're adhering to those requirements to the greatest extent possible.
Thank you. And are there city inspections of the area to make sure they're clean, or is it mostly complaint-based from residents?
I would refer to Commissioner Steele, but I believe that quite often it's generally by complaint basis, and as bylaw enforcement officers are out and they see infractions, they would bring it to the developer's attention.
Thank you. And Commissioner Massaro.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Davidson. Absolutely. As part of the development process, infrastructure delivery does have all the inspection services for capital and development projects. And to build on Acting Commissioner's comments, yes, we aim to improve the construction experience as much as reasonably possible and ensuring that we're proactive in our approach in maintaining dust, noise, and the like during construction. So there's consideration for the existing residents while we have new communities that are being built at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. Mayor West, do you have any remarks? No. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we move on to 11.5. Property Standards Bylaw, Clean Neighborhood. And Councillor Tree would.
Oh, was the one who.
Oh, you pulled it. Okay, sorry.
I was the one who pulled it,
So
yeah.
you are moving a motion to receive that.
Well, it's not just to receive.
Oh, to.
This is a recommendation, Madam Chair. Clearly set out in the staff report from A to F. We are on 11.5.
Oh, I missed one. 11.4. My apologies.
Oh, okay.
We'll
So
come back to you.
11.4,
Stay
okay.
tuned.
So I hold my horses. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So 11.4 Water and Wastewater Financial Plan. It'll be moved by Mayor West. Are there any questions? There are none. Oh, Councillor Thompson.
More an observation. I just want to confirm that although there was a number of figures that we saw in this report and also in the presentation we received earlier, that this is actually a living document and that the figures that we actually see in there are not necessarily what we might see come budget time. It's more for the public record. I just want to confirm that that's the case that when we actually get to budget, the decision will be based on current information at that time, right?
Go ahead, Treasurer Gigi. Lee.
It's through Madam Chair to Councillor Thompson. That is correct. It is a living document. So as we go through the annual budget process, we will be reviewing those assumptions, and then we'll come forward with the budget ask.
Right. Thank you. That was all my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see any other questions. I do have one question. Is there any gain for a city to have a water conservation program, not just when it's a really dry season, but when just in general? I think I agree with the mayor. We all take water for granted in this country. But is the cost of encouraging, is it worth the cost of encouraging people to conserve water or promote programs? Because using less water would cost the city less. Is that, I go to you to ask that question.
Madam Chair, I would defer that to Mr. Scanlon.
Mr. Scanlon, there you are. Is water conservation a good project for the city, and will it actually pay off?
Through you, Madam Chair, conservation is always good programs from an environmental perspective. From a financial perspective, you have a lot of fixed costs. It's variable with what you purchase from the region, but you do have fixed costs such as the amounts that you have to transfer to the reserve fund. So if you reduce the amount of consumption, you still have to recover those fixed costs. So it ends up to be increasing the actual rates. So overall, I think it's a good program, Madam Chair. It may assist you, but not on a one-to-one basis.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. I see no other questions. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we move on to 11.5, and over to you, Regional and Local Councillor Chan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to begin the discussion with moving the recommendation for committee's consideration from A to F on page 1 of the staff report. I'm really happy that this is representing the modernization of our bylaws that governs the property standards. And I want to thank staff and because this is also something that they're just doing it within the offices confine or through the virtual setting these days, but they also have based on consultation and not just any consultation, because I noted that not only they did the first survey, but also did the second survey, which received 320 responses. 320 may not sound high to people, but based on my limited knowledge, sitting on council for quite a while, that is a pretty high number. So in particular, I think even the wording itself, connotation, clean neighborhoods, I guess that really says a lot of things. That messaging is right there. Now, one of the things that while we are modernizing that, and I can see the parallel between this and the amended noise bylaw, because introducing or using more quantitative and to the extent more objective kind of measurement that would help in terms of dispute and so on. Through you, Madam Chair, I do have a couple of you can call it questions just to make sure that I understand it correctly. One is in relation to the residential exterior lighting. The staff did in the report elaborate quite a bit on page 4 report, but through you, Madam Chair, and perhaps the Commissioner still, is that to what extent that shield requirement could be monitored for direct lighting? I mean, the lights, maybe help me understand how that could be implemented, in particular enforcement if it's needed. To you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Steele.
Through you, Madam Chair. So over the course of the last few months, we've actually done quite a bit of research into lighting and how it works. And actually, that's the easy part to monitor, whether there's a direct light coming onto a property. If you have a lux meter at night, you can see if it'll give you an automatic reading to show you if there's any direct light coming from another source over the property line.
Thank you. And the reason I raised this question because well, staff did a good job in terms of marking, but I noticed of the 11 that I've been compared with, at least 5 chose not to do it, or for every reason. That's why I sense that there may be actually some challenges in so far as enforcing it. But this is new, so we'll wait and see. Thank you for your explanation. Now, the other one is the feeding of wildlife. I remember when I was local council in Ward 6, one particular area, I have been getting quite a bit of complaints that it's not feeding of birds, it's feeding of other wildlife. Some of them might look cute and as friendly as you can, but you can appreciate that for neighbors of a do-gooder who used to feed all this wildlife will create an issue. So the report did not say anything about other kinds of wildlife. So I'm just wondering, through you, Madam Chair, to Commissioner Steele, what were the considerations for some other feeding of other forms of wildlife?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the report highlights some of the things that we've tweaked since you last saw the key directions report in January. If you go to the Clean Neighborhoods bylaw on page 7 of that bylaw, you'll see section 3.8, which deals with wildlife feeding, and it does prohibit it. The only wildlife that you're allowed to feed are birds pursuant to this bylaw, because you are quite correct, Councillor, that feeding wildlife does cause quite a few issues for property owners as well as for the wildlife themselves.
Thank you. And I'm glad you highlight that the specific provision that govern that. And I wish that lead to my last point is on the communication strategy that, in my humble view, that would need to be highlighted, emphasized, not to mention about this is new. So it probably takes time for people to know about it. And to the extent that it could be also with the help of strategic communications to do it in other languages, and at least that like Access Richmond Hill will do it other in English, at least 3, if not more languages, so help to promote. So I hope that will be considered in a more multilingual to the extent possible and based on our best practices in terms of communication. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do move the motion and section 3.8. I will talk to people about that. Thank you.
Wow, 2 seconds to spare. Good one. Mayor West, you're next.
Thank you. So I thank all the work that I thank the staff for all the work that's been done, and particularly on the lighting thing. I know that you know, they've worked very hard to get that right, and I know it's difficult. I mean, this whole judging, you know, what's acceptable from a standards point of view and what's not is not an easy task, and I know that our bylaw staff works really hard at that. One of the clarifications I just wanted to ask about is the move in this bylaw with the update to move this to the administrative monetary penalty system. Can you explain to me what would be the differences between the before under the present system and this system with regard to the application of the AMPS program?
Commissioner Steele.
Through you, Madam Chair. So what AMPS does is it allows us to apply what are called administrative monetary penalties to any infraction. And the one of the key points about administrative penalties is they are not meant to be punitive. They're meant to be at a deterrent level. So they're supposed to be sufficient to deter people from doing the action, but they're not punitive. And because of that, they don't have to go through the court system. They're adjudicated in-house. And that allows us to to issue them more easily as a sort of an enforcement measure to make people comply more easily. And also, if we do have an issue, it gets resolved more quickly. For example, if we issue a penalty and someone doesn't agree that they should have got that, the adjudication system is much easier for the resident to work with.
So the court appeal process will no longer apply to this new system and way of doing things after this is passed.
Through you, Madam Chair. So the court system is still an option. So one of our goals with these bylaw amendments was to broaden our enforcement options. So now we have, through these bylaws, 4 different enforcement options, actually. We have the administrative penalties, which are deterrent fines. We have the ability to do work on private property if it's a safety concern and it needs to be resolved quickly, and we can actually take care of that ourselves. We could still issue what's called Part 1 tickets under the Provincial Offences Act. So those are deterrent and punitive monetary penalties, essentially. And we can issue what's called Part 3 orders or charges, which is for the more serious things that you need a court order to resolve.
What I'm getting at with this is that in the past, aside from parts of this bylaw being a little bit outdated, which we're certainly looking at here, and we've done it through a lot of public consultations, so that's great. The other frustration that I've had as an elected official for a number of years with regard to property standards is that it takes a really long time sometimes for action to be taken to correct the problem. Like we've identified that, yes, in fact, there is a problem with the compliance and with the bylaw, but it takes a really long time for us to actually get around it to producing corrective action. How will this new suite of tools address that concern?
Through you, Madam Chair. So that was the purpose of separating the one bylaw into 2 bylaws. So the property standards bylaw is a bylaw that's enacted under the Building Code Act, and there's very specific timelines in the Building Code Act associated with property standards. And you have to give significant periods of notice. By pulling out the more minor offenses and putting them in clean neighborhoods, which is a bylaw under the Municipal Act, it allows us to respond much more quickly. We can adjust our own enforcement times to be much quicker, and we can use the amps.
That's really what I was getting at. That's because I think that aside from the details of this bylaw, which are all important, and there's a good update in this, but I just think we're going to see, I'm expecting a much more responsive bylaw. So not only are the details of this bylaw updated and more modernized and all that stuff, and that's great, but the ability for our staff to actually do something when something happens that's not in compliance with that bylaw is there. And that's really, I think, in my mind, the meat and potatoes of what the public is going to see with regard to the outcome of this. So regardless of the details of the bylaw, which are very important, the ability for staff to be responsive, I think, is the most important part of this. I'm very enthusiastic to see this passed, and I think that it will bring us much more close to the expectations that people have when they file a legitimate complaint that something's not right in the neighborhood. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to support this.
Thank you. Next, we have Councillor Shu.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the report and the hard work, and I support this report too. But I have several questions regarding the details of the bylaws. The first one is regarding the vacant buildings and properties under the Clean Neighborhood bylaws. How do we define vacancy? Is there any specific time frame used to determine if a house is vacant or only unattended? That's my question.
Is that you, Commissioner
Through the chair.
Steele?
So I'm going to defer that to the Director of Bylaw, Dong Dai.
Go ahead.
Through the chair to Councillor Shi. There's no definitive timeline that we have outlined specific in the bylaw, but based on past practice, staff will conduct an inspection determine a reasonable amount of time frame if that house is uninhabited. We do have some other tools as well. For example, best practices would be to review the water usage of that property. Right? A single family dwelling uses on average a specific amount of water usage. We would monitor that and determine that if that water usage and use that to support our actions, if that makes sense.
Okay, through the chair, I recall there's one recent case in my ward, and one owner of the property has just passed away, and the nearby residents just complain about the house is unattended or just left alone, as nobody care about it. So what's the usual procedure of the city for managing this property by the city, usually?
So typically what we would do is we would try to reach out and we would deal with it on a case-by-case basis. From past experience, sometimes it could be taking over by the province where the public guardian trustee takes assumption of the property if there's no next of kin. We would follow up with legal or the next mailing address. We would make determinations on a case-by-case basis, and they do tend to vary. But essentially, we try to establish a person or an agent that's responsible for that property, work with that property owner, or whoever before making a determination about conducting any remedial work under these various bylaws.
Okay, so maybe we have to talk offline, okay, for the details. Through the chair, my another question is regarding the residential exterior lighting under the Clean Neighborhood bylaw as well. So does the bylaw cover Christmas lighting? So what about an illuminated Santa Claus displayed in front yard? Is it covered by this bylaw?
Through the chair to Councillor Shi, I'll defer that to Commissioner Seal.
Oh.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So it's very unlikely that Christmas lighting would, like Christmas lighting is indirect generally. It's just lights. It's very unlikely that it's going to go over the lux measurement for indirect lighting. We haven't exempted it. We'll have to do some monitoring and see what happens. But we believe that reasonable amounts of Christmas lighting is not going to trigger an offense. And also remember that this is a complaint-based bylaw. So it's unlikely that, I don't think we've ever had any complaints about Christmas.
Okay. Okay, my last question through Madam Chair is how about the backyard lighting? Considering that some areas have backyards that directly face each other. So are this type of backyard lighting also regulated by this new bylaw, backyard lighting? Because it's a private property. Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, yes, if I understand your question, you're asking if backyard landscape lighting would be restricted? Yes. Certainly, it's regulated to a certain level now and also has to be turned off at 11 p.m. unless it's being actively used or is for security purposes.
Okay, thank you. Clear now. That's all my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Councillor Tweed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for our staff to prepare this bylaw. As I experienced in the last few years, a lot of complaints regarding the direct lights at the backyard, also abandoned house or vacancy house, also animals as well. So I think this bylaw is meeting or fitting the gaps from bylaw's perspective. We do have something we can follow up. Otherwise, we just based on case by case and there's no rule at all. So I would say thank you so much for the offers, all the efforts from our staff to prepare a baseline so far. I'm assuming there might be a response back after we follow this bylaw. There might be some pushback from residents, but at least we do have something we can follow. So I appreciate all the efforts here from to this staff. Thank you so much. And there is one question regarding to the bylaw for the wild animal birds, especially. Yeah, I remember last time we talked with our commissioner Steels regarding the swan in the lake. So at that time, being the swan should not be fitted as that bylaw. So for the new bylaw, the swan, the geese, those animals or birds can be fitted. Is that allowed by this bylaw?
Through you, Madam Chair. So I think if I understand your question correctly, you're talking about feeding on public property, and that's actually covered by our park use bylaw, and it's not allowed under our park use bylaw.
Okay, perfect. Okay, got it, perfect. Another question is regarding to those predators birds, hawks, eagles. I saw hawks hunting on the street from my backyard sometimes. So are those dangerous animals be treated as wild animals, can be fed by the residents as well? I saw the question here.
Through you, Madam Chair. So technically, they could. I've never heard of anyone doing that, though. So it's not really an issue that we tried to cover.
Yeah, hopefully no one gonna be feeding those dangerous animals, but you never know. I just threw this one. Let's run this bylaw and let's see how that feedback will be. There's another suggestion here is because it's a new bylaw, maybe the public education or notice should be sent out, let the residents know we do have something in front. If you see anything, maybe not as what you expected. So let's maybe review the bylaw half a year or 1 year later and see what feedback we get from community. We're going to make us judgment more feasible and practical. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Through the chair, yes, I also want to thank staff for putting this together. This is something that we've all been anxious for some time. I do have a few questions and observations, and I'm looking at Article 8 in regards to enforcement. And, it's, I think, as an example, I don't even believe the YRP can actually go onto somebody's property without a warrant. And our Article 8 says that, our municipal bylaw enforcement officer may, upon producing proper identification, enter upon any property at any reasonable time without a warrant for the purpose of inspecting the property. Because I'm sure, like I say, the police say they can't do it. I'm sure if I was a councillor looking to investigate some property, I'd be charged with trespassing, or at least, you would think I would. Anyhow, I guess my question is that this, well, two parts to my question, that our enforcement officers actually have that authority granted to them, and then the definition of property, are we just looking at the property and not inside the dwelling, or are we looking at both?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, so you'll notice that property in this clause is not capitalized, and it does deal only with exterior of property. We definitely do not have the authority to enter into a building without permission. So it's the exterior property, and this derives from the Municipal Act. The authority is there. We don't do it unannounced. We typically we seek to speak with someone first before we go on the property, always, unless there's a serious safety issue that is threatening another property. And I think that's where the allowance comes from in the Municipal Act.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm going to need a little bit more clarification. So you said property lowercase meaning a difference, because when I'm looking at the bylaw 6224, it defines property. It says means a building and includes the lands and premises. So I'm kind of confused now.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at the introductory sentence where it's not capitalized, so it's not property. But you're right, we should make an administrative amendment to that one, maybe the one.
Okay, so you're making a distinction between the property as a definition in the bylaw versus how we're using it here.
Okay. So I don't want to confuse things. We'll fix your minor administrative error.
Okay, I appreciate that. In regards to the clean neighborhood bylaws, we're talking about if somebody fails to correct a contravention. and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with case by case. It talks about contraventions if they haven't done anything by a specified date. And I can't find anything in here that makes any reference to how those dates are determined. And again, I've heard us talking about case by case. Is there some sort of guideline that gets used to say, okay, well, this is a first time contravention from this property owner, so we give them, 2 weeks or whatever it looks like. But, if we're seeing this person coming up regularly, we may look at things a little differently. Perhaps you could just help me understand how those dates get determined.
Through you, Madam Chair. So we do have standard operating procedures that we use for timelines and service levels for timelines. So they are not all the same, but they're not in the bylaw, so that we have some flexibility to adjust them as seems fit for specific situations. I don't know if the director wants to add anything to that.
Through Madam Chair to Councillor Thompson. So to build on what Commissioner Steele just said, yes, it wouldn't be identified in the actual bylaws, but it would be in our standard operating procedures. For example, it's a minor issue in nature that's captured under the Clean Neighborhoods bylaw. For example, garbage and debris that's at the side of a home. We would set out a reasonable expectation that within, for example, 3 to 5 days, someone would reasonably expect it to get that garbage and remove it. So that's captured.
All right, thank you. Because, and I'm sure other councillors have experienced the same thing, because we are talking complaint-based situations here. Quite often people are given a length of time, but the complainant that put it in, they're coming back to us 2 weeks later saying we haven't, nothing seems to have been done, and but meanwhile they were actually given whatever X amount of time to do something, and it may have fallen outside of their follow-up time. I'll leave that there. I was glad that local and regional councillor Chan had brought up about the wild animals, and particularly the bird feeders. And I think about in my own property, and so I'm a little confused how this height requirement was, how we came up with that, where that came from, because quite frankly, our bird feeders are definitely higher than 6 feet. So I'm not sure why we have a maximum that is set up here. I mean, at 4 feet, I can certainly see, the squirrels just having a feast and getting in there. And I guess that would constitute a wild animal getting fed. So I'm a little concerned about how those measurements came about.
I'm actually not sure how we got to the measurements, so do you know?
Through Madam Chair to Councillor Thompson, we came up with that measurement based on research and consultation from our animal services provider. Essentially, that height was determined for jumping height for squirrels, raccoons, and other wildlife.
Okay, but the way, sorry, through the chair, it reads as a maximum height. So I'm curious as to why we even have a maximum height, because now we're basically keeping it in the range where squirrels could get to that bird feeder.
Through you, Madam Chair, we can look into this and amend it for council next week if we find that's appropriate.
Okay, much appreciated. Those are all my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I see no other questions. I do have one question. If this fits in property standards, people are taking advantage of the using pavers for accents for front driveways and turning their entire front lawn into a parking lot. Is this a time to discuss that, or is that a different type of property standard? Because I know the bylaw is that you have a certain percentage of landscaping, but people, like there are some of my neighborhood, honestly, if you include the window, they have 7 cars parked on there every single night. So what can we do to rein in some of the parking lots we're seeing in front of residential homes?
Through you, Madam Chair. So this is not actually a property standards issue. This, right now, it's captured in several different bylaws. Most significantly in our zoning bylaws is where it sits right now. So it's being addressed through the comprehensive zoning bylaw. And I believe planning has a technical paper through the comprehensive zoning bylaw process that's been investigating what we should do in the future about this. And we also have a front yard parking and driveway bylaw, which is on our schedule to review coming soon.
Okay, good to know. So that satisfies me. We have no other questions. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on, we are, I actually pulled the Wilcox Boathouse, so I will pass the chair 11.6. I'll pass the chair over to regional and local councillor Pan.
Thank you very much. To take it that you're going to move the motion, Councillor Davison?
Yes, I would like to move this motion and I would like to make some comments. The area of Lake Wilcox, we all know, has grown incredibly, especially in the last 10 years. I've been there 25 years. I think the 30 years that the Richmond Hill Canoe Club have had that spot, they've made good use of it for their purposes. But I fully support an active request for proposal for somebody to come and do something that's more comprehensive for the community. There are courses available, but I think on the whole, most people in Oak Ridge's area don't access those. There's some cost issues. Also, I'm all for elite athletes, and it's great that there have been so many successes, but I would really love to see something that really appeals to the larger population and benefits the area. If there's some way that we can figure out to provide programs, maybe even ad hoc, nothing that you absolutely have to register for, something that's available when you go down to the waterfront. And the replacement of the boathouse at $400,000, to me, we better figure out a really good use for the community to authorize that kind of money. That is a lot of money. And I don't know that having one club use that is the best use of that money. I look forward to seeing more information from staff that building that boathouse is good value for the taxpayers of Richmond Hill. The mayor and Commissioner Steele and I had a meeting with folks in surrounding environmentally interesting and useful areas. And I would like to consider using that $400,000 to build that boathouse, or using less money to do more things in the area that benefit more residents. So I completely support the idea of asking the public what they want and asking for requests for proposal from everybody, including the Richmond Hill Canoe Club, come up with some ideas that really benefit the community as a whole. Those are my comments. And does anyone else? Okay, Councillor Thompson and then Mayor West.
Thank you. You're resuming the chair now.
Sorry, what did I?
It's okay.
What? Oh, I forgot. You're in charge.
Okay, thank you. No, yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I mean, I did say that. Thank you, Councillor Davison, and I do have a speakers list. Next person is Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you, the chair. I just want to make sure that I understand exactly how this came about. In reading the report, I wasn't clear if other organizations had stepped up to say that they were interested in perhaps being able to utilize the boathouse, or was it a matter of, because we've had this contract for 30 or roughly 30 years, was it that, you know, we felt, okay, we probably, it's probably time that we went out and got an expression of interest to find out if other organizations were interested. If I could just get some clarification on that.
Commissioner Stew?
Through you, Madam Chair, the latter, yes. It's just because it's been in place for so long that we are recommending that we do an expression of interest process.
Got it. I appreciate that. Through the chair, so, I seen that we had a 5+1+1 contract, and here we are, May of the final extension of that 1+1, coming up where this contract expires at the end of August. And we're talking about putting out an expression of interest as well as a community consultation process. What's the timing on all this? It seems like we've really taken this right to the end here. Could you perhaps give me some indication as to what we're looking at for those processes versus the contract?
Commissioner Stew?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the one option, staff could have renewed or undertaken a new agreement with the canoe club on its own. Through our financial control bylaw, we do have delegated authority to do revenue generating agreements. So this would qualify as that. So in terms of timing, there isn't really necessarily a rush. We are looking at doing the expression of interest and the public consultation within the coming year, within 2025. And recommendation D there is meant to confirm authority to continue to renew an existing arrangement if in the meantime.
Right, through the chair, I believe I heard the delegate say earlier that yes, they were interested in continuing, and I don't know if it was the particulars of the same contract or if you're negotiating some other sort of contract for continuing while the expression of interest and consultation process takes place. So if that's fine, I'm good with that. And okay, that's all my questions. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any other speaker? Yes, Mayor West, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for the delegate that came out to speak. I've actually lived in Richmond Hill quite some time and have had very, very, very little contact with canoe clubs. So I would welcome an opportunity to get to know you folks better. So maybe we could set something up after the meeting. What I will say, though, is I think this is a very reasonable approach. I think there are a couple of moving parts that are happening here, and they've been referenced in this discussion so far. That the cost of the revitalization of the boathouse is significant, and so this is, I think, a really opportune time to be taking a look at what we have in terms of arrangements for that site. I will say, in general, I think Lake Wilcox provides a real opportunity for people in Richmond Hill to do a particular kind of recreation that isn't really available in very many other places that don't have lakes, and especially small lakes like this, right? Like, we're not going to get big 6-foot waves like you do on Lake Ontario or Lake Simcoe. I mean, this is a very unique lake. But at the same time, I think we need to balance the needs of the community that live around it. And heaven knows that Lake Wilcox Park is already very well used, if to say the least. And that's great. I mean, I'm really happy to see that. But I think that what we have an opportunity here to make sure that whatever we do in that location is really, really, really done well. And I think that we have an opportunity to really capitalize on the opportunity to do something great for the community. And so I'm not presupposing any sort of an outcome of this type of process. But what I will say is, I think, it would be really nice to see the lake being used and this particular location being a way to facilitate that use. but it needs to be a use that's very accessible to the folks that want to do that type of recreation. And it needs to be a very welcoming and open use for the community. And I think that that's really what I want to see in the end. So I'm happy to see this. I really appreciate this coming forward. And as I said earlier, I mean, I do kind of welcome the opportunity to talk to folks at the Canoe Club and get to know what they're up to and you know what they have ability to do in the future as well. So I'll be happy to support the recommendation and thank you, Councillor Davidson, for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Mayor West. Councillor Tree, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Chair. So I just based on my personal experience, so I boated, canoed and subbed in that lake just for entertainment with kids. I don't see any major problems from just public perspective. I read the report, is seeing some complaints regarding to the boat club there. Is there any specific one or typical one complaint? Because I just speak on behalf of the normal parents, right? Bring kids to there and have fun time on the sand beach, go entertainment over there. Any specific complaints regarding to the use of that boat house?
Commissioner Stew.
Through you, Madam Chair. So I'm not sure about any specific complaints that we've received. That wasn't the main driver for the report. The reason we've come forward with this is the three things that are set out in the report. The fact that it's the agreement we have currently is due. The building needs to be repaired, and there was a proposal for a master plan for this area sitting in the 10-year capital plan. So those are the three things coming together that are really driving the need to look at this and make sure, confirm that or determine what we want to do with the facility moving forward.
Okay, got it. That's because I saw the report. There are a few sentences regarding to community requirement for more usage of this area. So just wondering, maybe it might be complaint from different units, organizations, or nonprofit to share the spot. This is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tree. Regional Local Councillor DePaulo.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the staff report. I really appreciate the approach that's been taken with this and the information before us. And I think we're in a very unique situation here. It's always a unique situation to have a lake like Lake Wilcox. We're really fortunate to have that, but I believe we're also very fortunate to have this canoe club and the function that they perform at Lake Wilcox. And I would love for it to be enshrined into an agreement. I would love it to be a ratified public-private partnership because the actors that are there today are excellent. They're exceptional. They're not exclusive. They don't bar any access from any residents and monopolize the use of the lake. They're very open to the community, very responsive to the needs of people that want to truly learn how to kayak and canoe, but also to use the lake. And they are the right custodians, I believe, in terms of maintaining water safety. I think in the absence of the canoe club and the way they currently function, it will be extremely problematic. This is not Wasaga Beach or Musselman's Lake or a lake that we can just have a free fall open to the public, beach or come and swim. It has to be restricted. I want the access to be there for the public at all times, similar to how it is now. But I think it's really going to change. The population of the GTA is exploding. It's not going to take long before they realize the proximity of this wonderful lake, and we really have to regulate the use there, and we have to have a guardian somewhat of the activity that's going on there. Properly trained people that know what they're doing. They're offering those lessons and coaching people how to use the water safely. So I think there should be a fourth option. I agree with option one. I think the right way to go is to maintain the lease with the Richmond Hill Canoe Club, but not to just repair the building. So this repair the building and continue the lease, change the building for a new future use, or eliminate the building. And I think we need to improve and change the building for the Richmond Hill Canoe Club, because I think they're the right use. The fact that there aren't washroom facilities there it has to be rectified. That has to be changed for the use of the public and for the people who use the canoe club. So I'd like to see a more significant, not just a renovation, but this is our opportunity to make a fabulous facility there. That's city of Richmond Hill owned and operated under an agreement that it's used by the canoe club and that they are also charged with and given the responsibility for maintaining water safely as they do today. And really, what I'd like the contract to be structured that we just maintain the status quo, but we make it a contractual requirement for the canoe club to do what they're doing, because the exceptionally good actors there are in there today, it could change if we don't have a formal agreement with the city. We couldn't just lease this to a third party entity and just have blind faith that they will always operate and continue as they are today. If that ever changed, it would be a shame. And if you're giving that kind of exclusive use of such a wonderful natural feature in our city to one group, then the stipulations upon how they conduct themselves have to be extremely strict. And I look forward to that process. I look forward to staff coming back with more recommendations. But my personal preference would be to greatly improve, not just repair, but improve, renovate that building and that entire portion of the shore for better use by the Richmond Hill Canoe Club. And I do hear other council members desire to have better access for the public, and I want to see that as well. I think there are other points on that east shore of Lake Wilcox that can be improved and enhanced for public use. I'd love to see some sort of vendor, a coffee shop, even a terrace going out over the lake. I think we have an opportunity with the land that we purchased on the north side of Lake Wilcox. Is my time up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, only 29 seconds over.
Okay, no. So yeah, I'll just wrapping up.
Second round?
But no, that's all I've said what I said. I want to accommodate both, but I think well, without the canoe club, and you look at Bond Lake, unregulated, with no presence from anyone, and the use of that lake is horrible at times. There's fishing, there's people lighting fires.
Councilor DePaula, with due respect, if you want to come back second round?
Oh, I was 30 over, not.
Yeah, you're
not 30
54
remaining.
seconds over.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all. Status quo for me. Thanks.
So you don't need a second round. Okay. So consider it's like a second round. Yeah, I'm just trying to help here because Madam Chair has been scheduled and it's a move for motion. Is any other members of the committee wish to speak? If not, maybe I would like to. No, I'd like to make comment for the first round before we go to the second round. First of all, thank you, Ms. Ben, for coming in and make the delegation. I have to say that I had the opportunity in the past visited the site. Yes, the building and the facility there is certainly needs improvement, no doubt about it. And also based on the presentation, what I have seen as well, that has been certainly ongoing program, and also it's been shown that there are members of the club that has been really willing contest and competition. And to that end, I think this is certainly that I also in support of a public-private partnership. On the other hand, I can see that just having the recommendation be that, meaning that inviting expression of interest does not preclude the existing canoe club to also, I believe that's the case. They also put in an application or proposal for that matter. In fact, I concur with all this because before me, this is really a natural treasure that we do have with Nick Wilcox. It's a very popular place. And perhaps some of these days, considering all the water safety, liability issue, and public access, all these matter, it could be like a dragon boat event even someday in a smaller scale. So I'm in support of looking forward. For those members, I hear that actually Clause D did say that the license agreement can continue until such time as the future is determined. So I think that provide the continuation until such time when the future is determined later on. So I'm in support of the motion that put forward by Councillor Davidson here, and I'd like to go to second round. And the first one on my list is Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I do think that the Canoe Club's done a great job, but I would argue from my perspective that it's not accessible to everybody because courses that are hundreds of dollars a week are not accessible to everybody, especially if you have more than one kid. And I accept this is a very exclusive type of sport, but for a public area and a public lake and for public money to be spent, $400,000 on a boathouse, it should be more accessible, not just to the people that can afford it. I don't know what that looks like until we ask. And like I said, the Canoe Club has every opportunity to put forward a proposal. I'd like to ask the commissioner, how much would it cost to recover the $400,000 based on fees that we charge to use that Canoe Club? How long would it take to recover the $400,000?
Commissioner Steele, or someone else might want to respond to it. Commissioner Steele, please.
Through you, Madam Chair, I have no idea the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you. I think that it would have to be a gift from residents to pay for that boathouse. So I think the whole question of the boathouse needs to really be looked at. The fact that we're asking for proposals from others, I assume there's a fairly stringent process through staff that we don't allow irresponsible, goofballs to come and accept a proposal from them. So the stewardship, I think, could pass to others should they be successful in their bid. So I'm not too worried about the care of the lake because I think anyone in there will have very clear guidelines as to what their obligations are. I think that's absolutely the wrong place for any further development, bathrooms or whatever. There's a huge bathroom block, 2-minute walk up the path. So I would like to make sure we protect the integrity of the natural environment, but also if we are going to allow activity there, that it is accessible to the residents. And whatever the proposals come forward, I look forward to considering them. Those are my remarks. Thank you.
City Manager, you have something to add?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to provide some context perhaps on some of the comments through the councillor. My first comment is that there's only so much that we are going to be able to do on this site. This building sits in a floodplain. We have had many conversations in the past through our master planning process on what is feasible there. So we know that we are severely restricted from anything else on the site. And I will also say that whoever that partner may be, whether it's the Canoe Club continuing on or another partner in the future, we will have to come forward with a funding model, a financial model, so that whatever that use is sustaining the cost, both from an operating and a capital perspective. I just want to remind Council for other not-for-profit community groups in this city through our pricing policy that was approved in 2016. Those groups now, all like your Richmond Hill Lawn Bowling Club, et cetera, that are using infrastructure are not only paying operating costs, they are contributing towards capital dollars as well. That is not the case with the current agreement with the Canoe Club. So I just wanted to provide some context for those couple of comments so you know what we're faced with financially.
Thank you very much, Madam City Manager. And I think that's really good information providing context. So Councillor Davidson, you finished?
I'm done.
I
Thank you.
have Councillor Thompson who want to have a second round.
Thank you so much. Through you, the chair, just to help me understand the scope of the use of the boathouse now in terms of a 12-month period. So well, I guess I need to know what number of months do the programs out of the Canoe Club work now? And then, I mean, is it a 12-month operation? And then, or is it a situation where once the program's finished, then basically it becomes a storage shed?
Who can answer that? Commissioner Steele?
Through you, Madam Chair, it is just the summer months our agreement with the Canoe Club applies to. But the city does use the building to a limited extent for some of our recreation programs as well. Particularly if we do open up the skating area on Lake Wilcox, then we use it in the winter as a kind of a warming station for staff that are there. But we do use a small portion of it for summer programs as well.
Thank you. And through the chair, do we have any indication as to what other programs could be operating through the winter? You just mentioned about potential of skating at some point. And I think about, some of those, and I'm not exactly what they're called, but they have the wind sail and they can go across the ice, that type of thing. Has there been any research done in that area in terms of other possible programming?
Commissioner Steele? But this is beyond boathouse now, right?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. So my reference to skating is in the past when we've cleared part of Lake Wilcox to use open to public skating. That's where we've used it. We haven't done any other research into how we might use the lake in the winter.
Okay, we'll take that offline then. Okay, those are all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Just any second round from other committee members? If not, I will call the vote that the motion in front of us has been moved by Councillor Davidson from A to D. All those in favor? And including, Councillor Chu on the, Councillor Neo on the screen, I would say pass unanimously. I'll be happy, I'll pass the chair back to Madam Chair and thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, can I ask council members if we want to press on, if there are a lot of questions regarding the asset management, because we only have 2 things left, or whether we want to take a break? What's the proper thing to do here?
So thank you to the chair. I would certainly see to maybe if we could just get a sense if there's a lot of questions on the next 2 items, because if there are, then I would certainly, for the general health and safety in accordance with the procedure bylaw, look to be recommending a lunch recess at this time. So you might want to just ask the question. Do you have a lot of questions on the next 2 items?
Going to ask questions on the asset program. Are you saying yes? 1? That's 1.
And how about
that's 5 minutes.
and how about the mayor's
and the mayor's motion? So with respect, if we press on, do we violate anybody's?
I would just say that I would comment that the procedure bylaw does say that we are supposed to take at least a 15-minute break every 2.5 hours. That's practice for so I would comment on that. But obviously,
Well, can we take 15, not an hour?
if that's what committee would like, just to take a quick 15-minute break to stretch your legs under the
Okay.
procedure bylaw and then finish it off.
Right.
That's
So we'll
totally
take
open.
15 now, coming back at 12:10. Okay. Thank you.